Welcome to We the People, talking all things politics from a patriotic, no-nonsense point of view.
Hey everybody, welcome back to We the People. As always, I'm your host, Skylar the Patriot. And on this week's show, we'll be discussing the threat that the Chinese Communist Party poses on the world and on their own people, their human rights violations, what they've done throughout the years, and what they're currently doing to this day. We're taking a deeper look into all of those things, as well as why it was a very dangerous and bad decision to be hosting the Olympics in Beijing. You can hear about all those things on this week's program, and as always, I thank you for listening and subscribing, and if you haven't already, you can subscribe to our show today. We're on every major platform, and we certainly do appreciate all of your support of this show and our organization. A lot of great information coming your way, guys, so stick around, and let's get after it. So as we've all been seeing on social media and throughout the news right now, the topic of Beijing. We're currently about 1 week into the Olympics, and that comes with obviously some certain interesting things. But first and foremost, I want to start off by saying that I wish our athletes the best of luck in their competitions. I certainly do support them. This is something that they've worked all their lives for. And obviously, I want to show my support for that and wish Team USA the most success going forward. I hope they win big. However, that does not mean that I support the Olympics being in Beijing, and I do want to make that point extremely clear. I think that was a very bad and irresponsible and dangerous decision made by the International Olympic Committee to have Beijing host the Olympic Games. And today, I want to take a deeper look into why exactly I feel that way. And it starts with a statement from the FBI. They said, quote, that the greatest long-term threat to our nation's information and intellectual property and to our economic vitality is the counterintelligence and economic espionage threat coming from China, end quote. So already we're starting off with something that directly affects both you and I. Odds are you're probably watching this video on your cell phone. And odds are you share a lot of information on your cell phone. I mean, Lord knows, we certainly use the things all the time. And odds are, and here's the problem, is that the microchip in your cell phone was made in China. The same goes for a lot of the software our corporations use, and perhaps even our own military, like we talked about last week on the show, making a cyber attack from China a very big threat to our nation right now. But obviously, as you can imagine, our own government, the Biden administration, would never stand for this, right? I mean, they certainly couldn't do that. Well, actually, guys, surprise, surprise, that's wrong. Chinese telecommunications company Huawei, who designs, develops, and sells consumer electronics and various smart devices, recently paid Democrat lobbyist Tony Podesta, a close friend and advisor to Clinton, Obama, and Biden. They paid him over $1 million. Think about that, $1 million to lobby the Biden administration on the company's behalf. Chinese company, Chinese tech company. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I certainly haven't seen any public condemnation of the Chinese Communist Party's threats and cybersecurity threats that they pose coming from the Biden White House. I haven't seen them make any comments like that. You certainly don't see Circleback Saki talking about anything like that. Lord knows, too, if she was pressed for the question, she probably wouldn't give you a straight answer anyway. And Biden can't complete sentences, and we know he likes to make plenty of deals with China. But that's besides the point. I'm sure this has absolutely nothing to do with that lobbying money. Of course, it probably couldn't. But the article from the FBI continued, saying that the Chinese government is seeking to become the world's greatest superpower, which, I mean, I think that's been pretty obvious to the past years. And it's doing it through things like practices like predatory lending, systematic theft of intellectual property, and brazen cyber intrusions. They went on to say that China's efforts target businesses, researchers, lawmakers, the general public, and academic institutions. We now know that as of December of last year, now pay attention because this involves your children. If you have a college student, this is probably going on in their college campus. Again, we've certainly seen this in recent years now. Chinese are posing a threat. But as of last December, a Harvard professor was found guilty of hiding ties to a Chinese-run recruitment program. This is something that the Department of Justice described as potential economic espionage. Again, wouldn't be surprised if this was happening on your child's campus or at the high school level or probably even at the grade school level. Now, I would not put it past them. And for those exact reasons, this is why we agree with the FBI that this problem will require a whole of society response, and that both the government and the private sector must commit to working together to better understand and counter the threat of China. That's why we're talking about it on today's show. But that's just the cybersecurity threat that China poses. What they've done for years in their own country is unimaginable to their own people. I don't even want to begin to think about what they potentially could do to the rest of the world if they tried to start actually taking things over. China has a very long history of human rights violations. And in 1979, they launched their infamous one-child policy, ordering that Chinese families were to only have one child per family, which consequently resulted in massive genocide, female infanticide. Official population statistics indicate a loss of more than 230,000 baby girls in just 1981 alone. That's 230,000 people in 1981 alone. This was something that the Chinese government said was needed, so, quote, the rate of population growth may be brought under control as soon as possible. So, of course, rather than solve what they called the so-called problem, they elected to just abandon or murder these prohibited children, mostly who were girls. Because, I mean, that certainly sounds like a reasonable way to handle a problem, right? Yeah, it's ridiculous. And in fact, it wasn't until 2015 that this rule was reversed, stating that then in 2015, the people of China could now have 2 children instead of just 1. Well, guys, how gracious of the Chinese Communist Party. By all means, let's try communism here. But after experiencing continued domestic pushback, all the draconian family planning laws were lifted in July of last year. Well, thank God, because it certainly was long overdue. It should have never happened, which is why I think it's very ignorant that people who don't know history, don't know current affairs, don't pay attention, and don't care to know, or perhaps have been lied to, are pushing for things like communism here in the United States and chant death to America. That is moronic, idiotic, and evil. China's long list of human rights violations don't stop there, though, however. In February of 2018, a revised regulation on religious affairs was established, with the government only allowing 5 officially recognized religions in approved religious sites in China. The revision invests all control over religious activities to the government, including finances, personal appointments, and publications. The law also states a goal of restraining what the CCP has labeled as, quote, infiltration and extremism, which has placed a significant limitation on religious freedom for Tibetan Buddhists and Uyghur Muslims. According to independent estimates, more than 1 million men and women have been detained in a sprawling network of Chinese concentration camps, with which what the CCP says exist for re-education purposes. That should sound frighteningly familiar, re-education purposes. Certainly hear that in today's society here in the United States. And we shouldn't be. A prisoner in one of the camps in the Xinjiang region, I believe she was then freed, she had stated that minorities have been removed from society and placed in an oppressive system of mass surveillance, detention, indoctrination, and even forced sterilization, which something, now whether or not it was a joke or not, Democrats did propose relatively recently. I believe it happened this last summer. We'll put a link or a post about that on our social media if you haven't seen it already. I did put it on my TikTok. But she went on to say that women, including herself, have been systematically raped, sexually abused, and tortured in the camps. But come to no one's surprise, of course, propagandist President Xi Jinping has denied all of these allegations of genocide. But, I mean, never mind the fact that he told his own police, this is in reports, told his own police to show the Uyghur Muslims absolutely no mercy when making arrests. And, for you guys, here's a picture of one of the camps right here. Take a look. Look at that. 2015. Okay? Now, 2018. Look at that. And now, 2020. Isn't that just absolutely unbelievable? I mean, can you say Nazi Germany? That's exactly what it looks like. And now they want to do things like that, too, with COVID concentration camps. The next offense I want to share with you and go over with you, I'm surprised doesn't have every single feminist completely outraged and protesting in the streets. But sadly, they're still blindly following the narrative being penned and perpetuated by the Democrat Party, but that's beside the point. In 2017, China ranked 100 among 144 countries for gender parity for the 9th year in a row. According to the party Congress, there is a substantial absence of women in chief political positions. Females in China are more likely to experience domestic violence, sexual assault, harassment, and workplace discrimination. However, it is difficult for women to overcome these barriers since the government does not favor women's rights at all, or activism. And culturally, they have certainly not been in favor of women much either. Having male children has long been seen as far superior over having a female child in Chinese culture. In fact, they've kind of been looked at as just a burden and doing really nothing for their families. How ridiculous. Women are not the only ones struggling in the workforce, though. Although labor laws in China allow for trade union organization and elections of trade union committees, the government ultimately still remains control over these rights. Go figure. That's communism for you. It's a big lie. Workers in China are not allowed to vote for trade unions, and the right to strike basically goes unacknowledged. And according to various human rights groups, China violates workers' freedom of association due to China's prohibition of independent union organizing and trade union law. Their policies take it one step further, requiring that all China Federation of Trade Unions must maintain communist leadership. So I guess so much for Karl Marx's great "Workers of the world, unite," right? Never mind that fact. You have no freedom under communism, and people need to start understanding that. Just look at history. It gives you all the information that you could need. History, very important, so you don't make the same mistakes. And you repeat the same things that gave you a lot of success. But hey. One thing that I think that you're actually going to find extremely interesting, especially interesting, is what I'm going to share with you right now. It's this next offense. About 500,000 individuals in China are currently being detained without trial, charge, or access to legal aid. Usual targets of this include petitioners and protesters that the Chinese Communist Party has labeled as enemies of the state. The party also continues to conduct politically motivated prosecutions. After a national crackdown in July of 2015, over 250 human rights protesters were detained. Some detainees admit to being tortured or forced to confess. Lawyers of the protesters are often harassed and intimidated by authorities as well. So, okay, think about that. Of all those offenses, what does that sound really, really familiar to, guys? Big point here. Nancy Pelosi's January 6th committee. Wow. Okay, so like China, it's politically motivated, it's authoritarian, it's tyrannical, and according to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the U.S. government has been abusing, torturing, and committing human rights abuses against the political prisoners who have been detained. Now, come to find out, this is very interesting. We're going to do a show on this at some point in the future. Come to find out, Nancy Pelosi is ordering her Capitol Police Gestapo, because that's what they are, her Gestapo, to raid Congress members' offices who she thinks played a significant role in the January 6th insurrection boondoggle. But by the way, when we had asked to see her emails and phone calls and other Democrats' emails and phone calls who are part of that January 6th committee, she claims sovereign immunity because the government just can't be touched. Well, let me ask you a question, America. Do you have a country really anymore when that's what they do? We need to take a stand right now against that kind of level of corruption. But this is something that, like I said, we're going to be discussing in the future because, again, can you say Nazi Germany? It's exactly like that. Like I said, the Gestapo. And the tyranny in this country is now just running absolutely out of control. It needs to be stopped. And the last human rights violation in China that I want to discuss with you ties right into potentially one of the biggest threats and problems of hosting the Olympics in Beijing, China. Chinese authorities control their citizens' internet use by blocking social media sites and restricting news publications. Any news reporting that, quote, slanders the country's political system is shut down. In June of 2017, a cybersecurity law was implemented requiring all internet companies working in China to regulate content for Chinese citizens. Again, Come to find out, what does that sound a lot like? Big tech censorship that we have here in the US. Seems to be that we have a lot of interesting parallels with that. Seems perhaps that maybe communism has found its way over here. But in the case of shutting down any reporting that slanders the country's political system, a high-ranking CCP official explicitly threatened the world's athletes in Beijing, saying that if they act, protest, or speak in a way that is offensive to Chinese law and the Chinese government, then there will be, quote, a certain punishment for that. Now, feel free to guess and speculate and whatever conclusions you want to draw on what that certain punishment could be. I can only imagine, based on everything else they do, what that just might be. However, what I do know is that this right here, this video I'm about to play for you, is how Nancy Pelosi responded to the Chinese government after finding out that that is what they said. Guys, roll the tape.
I would say to our athletes, you're there to compete. Do not risk incurring the anger of the Chinese government because they are ruthless. I know there is a temptation on the part of some to speak out while they are there. I respect that, but I also worry about what the Chinese government might do to their reputations, to their families.
What a great message of strength that she sent to China. What a great leader Nancy Pelosi is. She basically said that if our athletes speak out and they get detained, then there's just simply nothing that we can do. Never mind the fact that they are our people. These are our athletes. So, it's the old saying of, oh, I regret to inform you, but our hands are tied. Well, wouldn't really surprise me if the Democrats' hands are tied, considering they're profiting a lot off of the Chinese Communist Party. Sure, they don't want to make them mad. Don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. It's absolutely ridiculous. But my point here is this, and I'm going to leave you with this final note. Are these the policies that the Democrat Party is okay with? One would certainly be completely justified in assuming, yes, that they are, considering many upper U.S. politicians have sold out to the Chinese and made themselves millions of dollars, have enriched their own families off of backroom deals with the CCP. They certainly haven't done enough to condemn or hold accountable the Chinese government for their crimes against humanity by any means. Now, the same can be said for the International Olympic Committee, who has been corrupt for many, many years. If they know, and I can assure you that they do, about the horrors, what the Chinese Communist Party have done in their own country and the global threat that they pose to the world, that big giant threat, why make the decision to have them host the Winter Olympics there in Beijing, the heart of their country? Why do that? Very responsible, right? Well, according to the International Olympic Committee's own website, the goal of the Olympic movement, I didn't actually know there was an Olympic movement, but I have always kind of known what the Olympics do stand for, but they call it the Olympic movement. They said that the goal of that is to contribute to building a peaceful and better world by educating youth through sport, practice without discrimination of any kind in an Olympic spirit, which requires mutual understanding with a spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. Whether or not they actually live up to that is a different story. One could almost argue that they are globalists and too have sold out to China, like a lot of our politicians. Well, while our athletes certainly do value and display a lot of those characteristics and live up to those standards, certainly human genocide, rape, torture, and discrimination do not meet those standards and do not fulfill that mission by any means at all. So, while the International Olympic Committee continues to say congrats to Beijing for hosting the Olympics, I will continue to say on this show that that was a very bad idea. Well, guys, that's a wrap for today's show. As always, I'm Skylar the Patriot, and until next time, always remember, it's we, the people.